So it seems even after releasing the Extended Cut DLC, BioWare is still trying to repair the damage done from their poorly handled ending for Mass Effect 3. The first single-player DLC, the Leviathan, just released a few days ago, and it seems to be BioWare's attempt at trying to fix the confusion and the disappointment behind one of the major issues that players had with the ending, which was the Reaper's origins and motivations. The players, myself included, thought that the Reaper's origins and motivations, as explained by the Catalyst, were full of flaws and contained circular reasoning and were just plain illogical. But going back to the DLC itself, the premise is that you are given a mission by Admiral Hackett to check out the work of Dr. Bryson, who claims to have information about the Leviathan, a mysterious entity that is claimed to have been able to kill a Reaper. Now this is of interest to Shepard because he's looking for assets to help him win the war against the Reapers. But as with all the other war assets in the game, it really doesn't help him in the end. But I'll get to that later. Eventually, after Dr. Bryson is killed by his indoctrinated assistant, you set about doing his work and try to follow the clues he left behind to try to find the Leviathan yourself. This leads to some rather interesting gameplay segments where you look around the lab for clues to help you find people to help you find the Leviathan. Now, I did think it was interesting. I felt they could have done more with it. It seemed a bit too easy to narrow down the search, and even if you hadn't narrowed it down, it was still pretty easy to find the person. There was a rather interesting Paragon Renegade moment where after you had found Anne Bryson, Dr. Bryson's daughter, and you subjected her to the indoctrination artifact, you could either have kept it going, which would have narrowed down the search, but it would have killed Anne Bryson, or you could have shut it off early and you'd have like 3 locations to search through. But I felt like that wasn't too much of a consequence to allow her to die. I think if they should have explored that more, maybe made it a bit harder if you hadn't let her die and you let her live. But it was just too easy, even if you had let her live. I think I had let her live, but I found where the Leviathan was within the first system I went to. One of the most memorable moments for me was entering the strange mining facility that happened before the interrogation with Anne. But it just had this really creepy atmosphere because all of them were indoctrinated. And yeah, everybody just looked at you weird and said you shouldn't be here. And it was just really creepy. And I wish that the Mass Effect universe would have more moments and areas like this where it's just creepy. And that was just one memorable moment for me. There are, of course, a few combat scenes in the DLC, but there's nothing really interesting about them. There's no new enemies for you to fight or anything really different. I think this is mostly a story-based and choice-based DLC. There is a rather big combat scenario in the end of the DLC when you're on the ship on the planet where the Leviathan is supposed to be, and you do get to board an underwater Atlas, and you do get to fight with him before you actually go underwater. So that was a bit fun, but it's nothing new from the game. I was hoping that you would do a little more underwater, maybe some underwater combat or even exploration, but you really just take a straightforward path. And although the visuals are really nice, though, I will say that it's really cool to see all the different stuff underwater, like the big jellyfish and the sunken ships. But you just take a straightforward path until you meet the Leviathans, the creator of the Catalyst. Now the Leviathan says some rather interesting things, so I'll let the conversation run and I'll pause it in between and give my own analysis and commentary on what he says.
I had to find you.
This is not your domain. You have breached the darkness.
You killed a Reaper. I need to know why.
They are the enemy. One that seeks our extermination.
But I thought you were a Reaper.
They are only echoes. We existed long before.
Then what are you?
something more. Your mind belongs to me. Breathe.
Dan, what's happening?
Your memories give voice to our words. Your nature will be revealed to us. Accept this.
The galaxy's at war with the Reapers. You defeated one. Why aren't you fighting back?
There is no war. There is only the harvest.
Then help us stop it.
None have possessed the strength in past cycles. Your own species could be destroyed with a single thought. But you are different. I have witnessed your actions in this cycle. The destruction of Sovereign, the fall of the Collectors. The Reapers perceive you as a threat. And I must understand why.
Now, I thought this was interesting because the Leviathan seemed to say that humans, and in particular Shepard, was unique among all the cycles. And I know this has something to do with the humans' genetic variability. I know if it's been said before, but I wish BioWare would give us some clue as to what really makes Shepard so special. I mean, sure, he's a good soldier and all that, but I mean, I'm sure there were other good soldiers in the other cycles. And I don't know, genetic variability just doesn't give a satisfying explanation as to why Shepard and the rest of the humans in particular are so special. Now the Leviathan says he needs to understand why, and so he obviously doesn't know, and I doubt even the Reapers know, and that's just kind of like a gap that BioWare left it's not satisfying.
Before the cycles, our kind was the apex of life in the galaxy. The lesser species were in our thrall, serving our needs. We grew more powerful and they were cared for, but we could not protect them from themselves. Over time, the species built machines that then destroyed them. Tribute does not flow from a dead race.
From this part of the conversation, we see that the Leviathans existed before the Reaper cycles began, and that they had what appears to be the natural ability to indoctrinate. Now, I've seen some people complain about this and saying, well, if they had the ability to indoctrinate lesser races and basically make them slaves, why didn't they just force them not to deal with the synthetics so that they wouldn't destroy themselves? But I think they're giving too much credit, too much power to the Leviathan's ability to indoctrinate. Throughout the DLC, we can see that there are ways to block the indoctrination process, and it seems that the Leviathans didn't really indoctrinate them completely. They just indoctrinated them enough to serve their needs, to give them whatever they wanted, but for the most part, the lesser races were left alone. Hence their freedom to make synthetic beings. And also, I think, as powerful as indoctrination is, it's not absolutely powerful. You can see from throughout the DLC that, one, the Leviathans need these artifacts to cast out their indoctrination signal, and two, they don't indoctrinate someone 24/7. If you look at the assistant, for example, from the beginning, you didn't know that he was indoctrinated. So the assistant was able to do whatever he wanted. It was only when they needed them that they actually used their dominating powers. And I think this applies to when they use it on the lesser races. They only used the indoctrination on the lesser races of when they really needed something from them. But otherwise, they just left them alone to do whatever they wanted.
To solve this problem, we created an intelligence with a mandate to preserve life at any cost. As the intelligence evolved, it studied the development of civilizations. Its understanding grew until it found a solution. In that instant, it betrayed us.
So here we see a little more into the intelligence, or also known as the catalyst creation. And we already knew that it was created to preserve life and to solve the conflict between synthetics and organics. But what's important to note here in this conversation is that the Leviathan says that the mandate was to preserve life at any cost. Now that any cost is important. It seems to suggest that this whole Reaper cycle thing occurred because of a programming error on the fault of the Leviathans. It seems that the Leviathans coded this AI program so that it would preserve life, indeed, but they forgot the failsafe that it would destroy their own makers. I mean, it does reinforce the analogy that I made in my previous commentary on the endings, where I compared the Catalyst to an AI sort of like HAL 9000 from 2001 in Space Odyssey, where the program found like a conflict. It wasn't able to reconcile a conflict between its mission and its other failsafe to preserve human life, and that just made it genocidal. And that seems to be the case also with this Catalyst. But in hindsight, it seems kind of laughable that the whole Mass Effect games are the result, or at least the plot of the Mass Effect games are the result of a programming error. So it just seems kind of ridiculous, and yeah, BioWare kind of wrote themselves into a hole in that.
It shows our kind is the first harvest. From our essence, the first Reaper was created. You call it Harbinger.
You built that machine despite what you saw the other races experience. Why?
You cannot conceive of a galaxy that bends to your will. Every creature, every nation, every planet we discovered became our tools. We were above the concerns of lesser species. The intelligence was envisioned as simply another tool.
And now we all pay the price for your mistake.
There was no mistake. It still serves its...
So here we get a look at the arrogance of the Leviathans. It's just so high up there. They see what happened to the lesser races, but they themselves are like saying, oh, those are the lesser races. We know what we're doing. We're better than them. We know how to make an AI that won't rebel against them. And, well, what do you know? It does. And it seems that BioWare, or at least the writers of this Reaper origin or motivation, are really trying to push this idea that synthetic life will always rebel against their creators. And this can be made no clearer through this really powerful society as the Leviathans are still subject to this synthetic betrayal. And it really bothers me that the writers of this are trying to force this idea that synthetics will always try to destroy organics down our throats, because you can point evidence to the contrary within the same game. For example, the Paragon resolution of the Geth-Quarian War, where the Geths and Quarians have made peace and they don't want to destroy each other anymore, or Edie's wanting to integrate with organic life. It makes me really question whether the Mass Effect writing team were on the same page. And there's also a serious flaw in this, and I don't know whether the writers intended this or not. But okay, you granted that the lesser races had problems with synthetics destroying them. Okay. But the Leviathans didn't really seem, at least from what we're given, didn't seem to have a problem with that. They didn't seem to have a synthetic being that they created rebel against them, with the exception of the intelligence created that they made to solve this problem. And it's just really confusing, and it's just kind of circular reasoning that just makes it so confusing, and why there was so much of a controversy at the ending, because it just doesn't make any sense. It basically says that the Catalyst is guilty of what he's trying to stop. So it's just a circular reasoning that really messes everything up, and I really wish they hadn't gone through this kind of reason for the Reaper's existence, because it's just so stupid. And trying to take the easy way out, saying all of this was just based on a programming mistake, is kind of taking a cheap way out, and really cheapens the entire Mass Effect universe.
Purpose.
How did you remain hidden all this time?
Our extermination was not complete. Some survived and found refuge in the dark corners of the galaxy. I am their progeny. Over the cycles, the thrall races were controlled, removing traces of our existence as we directed them to. In this way, our survival was kept secret from the Reapers. Today, we reach out through the fragments and watch for discovery.
So here we see exactly how the Leviathans were able to survive the Reaper cycles and why they didn't necessarily intervene in any of them. We know that the Leviathans held their survival as their topmost priority, so they didn't want to intervene in a fight which they knew they would not be able to win. And they were waiting until the right time to fight back against the Reapers when they knew they were just able to completely dominate them all. But until then, until now actually, because they're found out, so they have nowhere to run exactly. Although it is implied that there are Leviathans on other worlds. So, but as of right now, the Leviathans on this world are found out, so they have to intervene in some way, otherwise they'll be destroyed. And some people have suggested, well, their indoctrination powers are so much more powerful than the Reapers, which will be evident by the end of the DLC in this one cutscene. So why can't they just completely destroy the Reapers? Because it just seems so easy. But I think again we're giving too much credit to the Leviathan's ability to indoctrinate. And I think if the Reapers came en masse to any Leviathan world, they would be overwhelmed and wouldn't be able to dominate any of the Reapers fast enough.
Fragments? You mean the artifacts we found?
They provide a window into the galaxy. Tools for exploring the events of this cycle from the safety of this world. Through them, we watch, we study, and remain in the shadows.
How did the intelligence defeat you?
To find a solution, it required information. Physical data drawn from organic life in the cosmos. It created an army of pawns that searched the galaxy, gathering this data. There was no warning. No reason given when they turned against us. Only slaughter. Only the harvest.
Tell me about the Reapers.
Each harvest ends with the birth of a Reaper. Perfect in its design. Each formed in Harbinger's image. Our image. Each Reaper has the power to influence organics. Over countless cycles, this ability was refined, perfected, and gave rise to indoctrination.
But what's the point of all these harvests?
The intelligence has one purpose. Preservation of life. That purpose is not being fulfilled. It directed the Reapers to create the mass relays to speed the time between cycles for greatest efficiency. The galaxy itself became an experiment. Evolution its tool.
Now, as convoluted as the Reaper origin was, I did think this part was actually pretty good. The explanation that the Leviathan gives as to why the Reapers created the mass relays, and I guess by extension the Citadel, was a pretty good explanation given what they had. I am still a little bit confused as to why, for example, the humans weren't able to figure out the date discrepancies between actual Prothean technologies and the mass relays, because I remember there was a point in time where they thought the mass relays were the result of Prothean technology. So I'm just kind of confused about that, but maybe there's an explanation for that.
Will it ever end?
Unknown. Until the intelligence finds what it's looking for, the harvest will continue.
What do you know about the Crucible?
We have watched its construction before. It has never been completed. Those who have tried still fell victim to the harvest. Its outcome is unknown.
Now I think this part of the conversation reveals yet another plot flaw in this whole Crucible thing. The Leviathan says that he knows of its existence, but he doesn't know exactly what it does. But did the Crucible just come out of nowhere? I mean, somebody had to have known what exactly it did. And I think the Leviathan stated before that even though they're keeping their existence secret, they still have those artifacts out somewhere in the universe, to kind of make like spies, I guess you could say, of the cycle of the races that were in the different cycles. And one of those races had to have, or one of those civilizations had to have known what exactly did the Crucible do. This Crucible that just comes out of nowhere seems like space magic to me, and I don't think BioWare's giving a good explanation as to how the Crucible came about, and I really think they should address it, because it's just confusing.
Okay, you made your point. Will you help stop the cycle?
I have searched your mind. You are an anomaly, yet that is not enough.
Wait!
The cycle will continue.
No! You've been watching. You know this cycle is different.
We will survive. You will remain here as a servant of our needs. The Reapers will harvest the rest.
If you release me, no one has to be harvested.
Nothing will change.
The Reapers know where you are. You can't just watch anymore. You have to fight. Even if you survive the battle today, the Reapers won't stop. Ever. Release me and we have a chance to end this, once and for all. I've earned it. Out there fighting, where you should be.
It is clear why the Reapers perceive you as a threat. Your victories are more than a product of chance. We will fight, but not for you or any lesser race. We were the first, the Apex race. We will survive. And the Reapers who trespass on this world will understand our power. They will become our slaves. Today, they pay their tribute in blood.
So here we see that the Leviathans finally see that they have to fight against the Reapers. They have no choice because the Reapers are just going to keep going against them. And that's great because Shepard needs all the resources he can get. And the Leviathans are clearly an invaluable asset to the war. Perhaps one of the most important assets to the war, because they actually have the ability to shut down Reaper, which you'll see later on. But by the end of the DLC, you'll see that all that you did to get the Leviathans' help really just amounts to nothing. I mean, you could have gotten any other war asset instead of the Leviathan asset, and it would have just been the same thing. I mean, it really doesn't make any difference. I mean, it implies that the Leviathans will send out some of their orbs throughout the universe to kind of help with the war, but I mean, you don't see anything about it in the ending. The only thing you see is the acknowledgement from the Catalyst. You'll say to the Catalyst, "Oh, I met your creators," and then he'll just say something to the effect as, "Good, I welcome them," whatever that means, and it just really makes this DLC. Like, it really questions the worth of this DLC. I mean, okay, the story's good, but there's no reward out of it. As to my overall opinion about this DLC, if you take it by itself, I definitely like a lot of individual elements of it. I really liked that investigation part where you go through the lab looking for clues to narrow down your search. I think that was definitely a step in the right direction, and I hope to see that in more DLCs of Mass Effect and other games of this type. It really brought something fresh to the game. I think even though they could definitely improve on it and make the different consequences of some of your actions a lot more impactful, like maybe, like for example, the Paragon Renegade moment where you have Anne Bryson be indoctrinated for a moment. I think they kind of missed the mark on that a little bit, but it was a step in the right direction, and I really liked that part. And I also really like the mining facility part because it just had a really creepy atmosphere, and I really wish they would do some more interesting scenarios like that mining scene in the Mass Effect and future DLC because it brought some of the most memorable moments of this DLC. This mission was a little bit short though. It took me about 2 to 3 hours to complete everything in this Leviathan DLC. Which isn't too bad considering it's in there with the rest of the market. I think the rest of the DLCs in the market are about this length. But I mean, even though it's with the rest of the market, I really don't think it's worth $10. Looking at the DLC itself, I would say more so $5 would be a good price. But that being said, when you take a look at this in the entirety of the game, look at its place in the Mass Effect 3 game, I really can't recommend it because even though the mission is nice and all, and even though I already vented my frustrations about the Reaper origins, but just knowing that everything that you do in this DLC really amounts to nothing when it's set up to make you think that it should. Because I remember the announcement for this game, and the trailer implies that this is going to be really big for the story. You're meeting who created the catalyst. I mean, that's a pretty big thing in itself. And the announcement blog post implied that this would have some options for the ending or give some change something about the ending. So that's why I was really excited to get this. But it turned out, I mean, it barely has anything to do with the ending, with the exception of a line that the catalyst acknowledges them, which, I mean, that's basically nothing. And when you look at the abilities and powers of the Leviathans, you expect them to have a really big impact on the war. You see the Leviathan take one brute and turn it against another, and take down a Reaper with just its thoughts. You expect that to completely change the course of the war because that's a really big power right there. But they just completely ignore it in the end, and that's why I really can't recommend it to anybody else. Maybe if it goes on sale you could get it, but otherwise just look up the information on a wiki or something, or look up some walkthrough on YouTube. But anyways guys, let me know in the comments what you think of the Leviathan DLC. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.